Hello and welcome to Good Evening Britain, a Force for Good's weekly show coming to you live from our studios here in the heart of the great British city of Glasgow. With me, your host, Alistair McConnachie. We are broadcasting on all our digital platforms throughout the United Kingdom and across the world. We're bringing you quality pro-UK comment and analysis every Wednesday from 7 until 8 p.m. on Facebook, on YouTube, on X, and on TikTok. Folks, please send us your comments. Please send us your questions. Please send us your greetings. Tell us where you're watching from on this great British evening. We have viewers watching throughout the United Kingdom and across the world, as we like to say. And if you're somewhere across the world, please chime in and please tell us what's on your mind as well tonight. Well, we've titled this programme Swinney and SNP Humiliated. Yet again, they have been humiliated by the Supreme Court, and yet again they have been put in their place. How many more times do they need to be told? And irony of ironies, it's about this issue that constantly dogs them, which you know what that issue is. It's this inane issue on the gender question. And so we're going to be looking at that. We're going to be saying what was actually judged. What does it mean? What's likely to happen as a consequence of that? We're also going to be looking at the record-breaking channel crossings that have been occurring in the last week. And we're going to show how to stop them, because you know what? I'm fed up watching the news and people just reporting it, and nobody comes out and tells you what actually needs to be done to stop it. So we're going to be running through that as well. And we've also got some exciting news about activism, which we are going to be engaged in next Wednesday. We're going to be telling you about that. We're going to be asking for people to join us. We're going to be showing you how you can join us in that activism, which is sure to hit the national newspapers. All of that and more, if you need more, on this show tonight. And this is our 136th Good Evening Britain show. And that has to count for something, doesn't it? 136 of these. We've been knocking them out. Goodness sake. Dispensing wit and wisdom every Wednesday. And we have no intention of stopping either, because we can't be stopped, because this is a force for good. And we're here to stay, as we always like to say. Let's say hi to one or two people who have come in already. Derek was first in. He says, good evening, Alistair and the AFFG family. Hope everyone is fine and well this rainy day. Derek, a sterling stalwart. Here's another Debbie Beer. Just got back from Carnoustie in time to watch. Fantastic, Debbie. Hope you and the family are well. Hi to Oksana. And to Paul from Kent, the Garden of England. Hello to Exiled Viking. Good evening to you, sir. And to Alan Dawes, who says, good evening, everyone. Christopher says, another great day for unionism and common sense. Good evening to all fellow unionists. Oh, Exiled Viking is not well. Sorry to hear that. Hope your throat infection clears up pronto, sir. Good stuff. Now, let's begin at the beginning with the Supreme Court judgment today. What's all that about? Because once again, it's embarrassed John Swinney and it's embarrassed the SNP. But you know what? It should also embarrass Labour and it should also embarrass the Lib Dems and the Greens, needless to say, because these are the parties that have been promoting all of this kind of stuff for many years now, for over 20 years. You know, if we cast our minds back to 2004, there was an act passed in the British Parliament, and it was called the Gender Recognition Act. And that was an act that allowed adults throughout the United Kingdom who have gender dysphoria to change their legal sex on a piece of paper. And that came into effect back in April 2005. And that was under the Tony Blair government. And the Labour Party, whether throughout the UK or here in Scotland, they've always supported all of that kind of stuff anyway. They've always voted in favour of whatever the SNP has voted in as well. It's just simply that since 2007, the SNP has been the reigning power here in Scotland. But we've got to remember the complicity as well of Labour and Lib Dems and Greens in all of this rather inane activity. So what happened was there's a campaigning group called For Women Scotland, and they took a case to court. They took it initially to the courts in Scotland, the inner house, and then the outer house. And what was the case about? Well, it revolved around what was the legal definition of a woman. Under the Equality Act 2010, the Equality Act 2010 is another act of the UK Parliament. And they wanted to know how the definition applied to another act called the Gender Representation on Public Boards Scotland Act 2018. And the Scottish executive, the SNP, they said that a trans woman, a man who claimed to be a woman, should be considered a woman for the purposes of meeting the gender representation targets on public boards. So, for example, if a public board said we want 10 representatives here, 5 of them have to be men, 5 of them have to be women. The For Women Scotland people were saying, well, as far as the women are concerned, are you allowing men who claim to be women to be counted as women on these boards? And the Scottish executive said yes. So the For Women Scotland thought, quite understandably, that that wasn't very fair. So they took the SNP's and Scottish Parliament's definition of a woman to court and said, what is the proper definition of a woman in British law as far as the Supreme Court is concerned? But first they took it to the first court in Scotland that they have to take it to, which is the I'm going to say inner house. And the inner house found against them. The inner house of the Court of Session. Got that wrong. It's the outer house they took it to. They took it to the outer house. That's the first court that they take it to. and the outer house found in favour of the SNP and the executive. So they took it the next one up, which is the inner house. And again, the inner house found for the SNP, found for the Scottish executive. So they took it to the ultimate court of civil appeal in the UK, which is the Supreme Court, which is the court that sits down in Westminster. It's made up of judges from all over Scotland, England, Northern Ireland, and Wales, and it pronounces it. It's the ultimate judge for these civil matters for the UK. And today, the Supreme Court found that the definition of a woman is, as far as the Equality Act 2010 is concerned, the definition of a woman is a biological female at birth. It's not a man who claims to be a woman. And, you know, you would think, well, yes, well, we all knew that, and we've known that since we were able to become conscious as human beings all those years ago when we were in the caves, if you believe that kind of thing. So, however, this is modern Scotland in 2025, and we do have to go through those sorts of illegal processes. So it's remarkable that something like that had to be taken to court. But of course, it had to be taken to court in order to get a proper decision, because the matter had been so confounded and complicated by gender activists, people with a desire to make those kind of distinctions for whatever personal reasons that they have going on in their own lives. So that had to be taken to court. It got taken to court. The Supreme Court today has said the definition of a woman, as far as the Equality Act is concerned, is a biological female. I'm glad that they said that, because if they hadn't said that, that would have been mad, really. So the question now is, okay, well, what does that actually mean in practice? Is that going to affect women's spaces? Is it going to affect men in women's toilets? Is it going to affect men playing in women's sports? And all of that is at the moment up in the air, because nobody really knows whether it's going to make much of a difference to those sorts of things, and to what extent those kind of things are just going to depend upon the particular contexts of the gymnasium or the restaurant or the sports team, and what their particular preferences may or may not be. So nobody really knows how that decision, that judgment, is going to work through the rest of reality. But it's certainly a victory for those people who have always believed those sorts of things. So it's very good news for us who believe those sorts of things, and it's very bad news for the SNP. It's bad news for Labour. It's bad news for the Lib Dems. It's bad news especially for the Greens, who are somewhat obsessed with these gender matters. So it's always good to see them struggling with things, isn't it? Absolutely. So that's one good thing. And again, Swinney's been humiliated. And isn't it ironic the extent to which this inane discussion, this inane concept has undermined the SNP consistently. It's undermined all its leaders, yet they persist in doubling down on these kind of matters. But it undermines them, and it humiliates them. And in the case of Sturgeon, it destroyed her. It didn't do Humza Yousaf much use, and now it's embarrassing John Swinney. Wouldn't it have been better just to leave those topics completely alone? But no, they had to go there for their own ideological purposes. And you do find that with some of these people. You can say, well, that's not a very good idea to do that, but they'll do it anyway, just because they think the principle is much more important than the actual practical reality. They put principle before practice. Anyway, suffered a blow, which is fantastic news. Let's have a look at some of your comments. D-Tube, thank you for the super chat. £2, and that's well worth saying. SNP and Greens are crazy loonies. Thank you, D-Tube. D-Tube is a great super chatter. For those who don't know, super chat is when you send a donation because you're loving it so much. And you do that on YouTube by clicking the little $sign below the video. Thank you, D-Tube. Paul says, well, aren't the SNP too thick-skinned to be embarrassed? Good point. Stephen says, you know, gender dysphoria, quote unquote, is just the highly subjective opinion of medical personnel. There's nothing empirical, as in scientific, about it. Alan says, we're living in ridiculous times when even some women don't know what women are, and it becomes a Supreme Court issue. The world is laughing at us. Exile Viking says, woman is an adult human female. Budgie says, I got called a heteronormal by a lefty for saying that. I think heteronormal is meant to be an insult. I never heard the phrase, but I can't see it being an insult. Christopher says, this is a matter where political posturing and opportunism have come up against the reality of the law and biological fact. Alan says he hopes it's going to be a turning point for more common sense. Jolly Good on TikTok wonders, is the Supreme Court a Scottish or English court? Well, it is actually the genuine British court. It's the Supreme Court for UK civil law. The ultimate court of appeal for UK civil law. And it has got, as I say, it's got the Scottish, English, Irish, Welsh judges on it. We've always said that it should move around the country. I know it's easier to be based, I suppose, just down in one area, but it's always good if it moved about each year. It could move some judgments around the country. I'd be all for that. And in fact, it's done that before. It has had a sitting in Edinburgh. And I think we should have more of that. Just so helps people to understand the legal and constitutional structure of the United Kingdom and how it's really quite integrated in many ways, which it should be, of course. Oksana says they should be concentrating, SNP that is, on the issues that matters. Mapex Scotsman said, how much did this case cost the Scottish public? Well, so far, to defend it, I saw an amount of £61,000 that it cost the Scottish Executive to defend the case. That seems to me extremely low. And on top of that, though, they're going to have they'll probably have to pay the expenses of the For Women Scotland group. And so the ultimate cost to the taxpayer will be well over £100,000 and probably far more, but we'll find out in time, no doubt. Well, Dominic says it wouldn't have passed if it was in Scotland. Well, certainly the outer court and the outer house and the inner house of the Court of Session did side with the SNP. Some people might say surprise, surprise. Christopher asks a very serious question. How many lives have been ruined and destroyed by this so-called gender fluidity and reassignment nonsense? How many people have made terrible life-changing choices that they have not then been able to live with? Well, goodness sake, that's a very concerning thing, especially when you're speaking about the young children that can get caught up in that, usually because their parents actually have some kind of strange fetish going on. Richard wonders, are the wheels coming off Western civilization? Well, let's hope not. Let's hope not. I tell you, the wheels are coming off the SNP, that's for sure. And they're going to come off even further next week because, and let me tell you about our planned activism for next week, okay? On Wednesday, the 23rd of April, here in Glasgow, John Swinney is going to have his much heralded anti-reform party summit. Now, he hasn't given it a name yet, but that's essentially what it's about. He's having a summit. He's brought together the leaders of all the main parties in Scotland, except the Conservatives, to discuss the rise of the so-called far right, by which he means the Reform Party. And he's going to be holding that in somewhere in Glasgow. Now, he has not, interestingly, announced the venue or the time. But he's surely going to do that in the next 2 or 3 days. Very possibly he might wait until the Sunday papers to give it a kind of run into the Wednesday. However, A Force for Good is going to be there. We're going to have our banner and we're going to have our megaphone, and we are going to challenge not just John Swinney, but we're going to challenge Anas Sarwar. We're going to challenge that guy from the Lib Dems, and we're going to challenge the Green people as well. And we're not going to be challenging them from a party political point of view. We don't support any particular party. We don't support Reform, Labour, Tories, Lib Dems, or any. We as an organisation are non-party political, but we are going to challenge these people on what on earth they mean by the far right, when it appears to us all they're really meaning is people who want to control immigration into Scotland and people who want to cut back on the numbers of asylum seekers who are coming to Scotland. We're going to be challenging them on those matters and asking them what is their solution to all of this. Do they just intend to keep the borders of Scotland open forevermore without any kind of control whatsoever? Because if you listen carefully to John Swinney, that's exactly his position. That's exactly his position. So we're going to be challenging that. We're going to be asking for, what are your solutions, Mr. Swinney, Mr. Sarwar, to stop the levels of mass immigration and asylum seeking into Scotland? Or do you support the fact that every year a population bigger than Paisley is coming into Scotland now? And so we're going to put them on the foot, put them on the back foot. And if you want to join us, stay in touch with us, okay? Keep watching our Facebook page every day. Keep watching our X page every day, and make sure you sign up if you're not already signed up to our email update, because we will be sending out an email update on that as well. So we've got the sign up address that you want to be signing up to if you want to stay in touch with us. Let me put that up there. That's a forceforgood.uk/sign-up. Make sure you're signed up to that, and you'll hear you'll hear as soon as we know where the venue is and when it's occurring. And we'll also send out an email the night before as well, just to keep everybody up to date on that. But we'll have the banners, we'll have the flags, and so you just need to turn up. It's going to be somewhere in Glasgow, and we're going to be challenging sanctimonious Swinney. It's going to be fun. It's going to be good. Can't wait for that. So please do join us. Richard says, excellent work. People like Swinney, Sarwar, and the political establishment have no answers because they've abandoned common sense. Screenshot that one, definitely. Like, comment, share, and subscribe. Richard says, Swinney's summit of stupidity. I like that one. Swinney's summit of stupidity. Sanctimonious Swinney's summit of stupidity. And oh man, is he sanctimonious? Hey, Rafa, good to hear from you. Any comments on TikTok that we can read out that are of value? Safri80 says, God save the king. Fantastic. So we'll read that one out. Definitely. Jamie says, hey, from Stirling. Good to see you, Jamie. And to Catherine. Good stuff. Paul says, if Swinney and the others really believe they are right, why not just debate reform? If they are right, they would win on those grounds. Well, I don't think that Swinney, and here's the thing, Swinney doesn't want to change his point of view. His head is still in a 1970s student union. His head is still in a world where the only immigrants into Britain were Afro-Caribbeans in London. And so he's lived most of his life without ever having to ever think about immigration, really, because it's never affected him, and it's had little effect in Scotland. It's only in the last 10 years that it's really started to come to Scotland, and in particular in the last post-COVID, in particular since 2022, after the Boris wave, that it's really taken off now, and the borders have been thrown open, and his head is still in the, oh, it'll be okay someday and we'll all just get along and everything's going to be fine. He's not, I don't think he's capable of thinking, oh my goodness me, we actually have a very serious situation on our hands here. This is an emergency. This could change Scotland into a different country very quickly. Within just a few years, Scotland could become essentially what looks like a foreign country. And he doesn't have the wherewithal to really grasp that reality and to do something about it. He's a man out of time. now. And you can see that in the way that he talks as well. He talks about things that he's believed in all his life are now being challenged. That's almost a direct quote from one of his press conferences. And he's right. He's right. Things that he thought were just normal, which is like, oh, yeah, there'll be immigration in London, but, you know, who cares about that? He's suddenly realizing, oh, no, I've got to have an opinion on that because it's happening right here. And he doesn't want to have an opinion because it's too scary for him to have to deal with. And so he would much rather just condemn everybody as far right and hope that somehow this matter goes away, even if the consequences of him doing nothing will mean effectively the end of Scotland as a recognisably native Scottish country. Oh, Alistair, what do you mean by native Scottish? A native Scotsman or Scotswoman is a person who can trace their ancestry, either fully or partially, back to grandparents who existed in some form on the 4th of August 1914, the day that World War I broke out, and whose grandparents were not required by the police to register under the Aliens Registration Act of the 5th of August 1914, the very next day. If you can trace your ancestry back on both sides or on one side of the family to that period, and you had a British citizen grandparent living in what was then the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Ireland and the Crown dependencies, then you have a claim to be native Scottish. Similarly, Welsh, English, Irish, or British. And we extrapolated that out and we explained why we believe that in our latest article, which you can find at aforceforgood.uk/blog. Because that period just before the war, before many British men lost their lives, that period, the people who lived in Britain at that time and Ireland and the Crown dependencies were effectively the same people who lived in Britain hundreds of years previously, with, of course, the exception of a tiny number of people who were not native British at that time, but a tiny, tiny number. So that's the period, really. It can't be after World War II because that would mean you weren't counting all the men who made the sacrifice in World War I. It would also mean that you weren't including the Irish, and I think the Irish should be included in the definition. And so that's our view. Check it out, aforceforgood.uk/blog. And it's the latest article, which is we aim for mass minus migration. And we explain all of the reasoning in there. Paul says, can people be trans Scottish? Have to contact the Supreme Court about that one, I think. Derek says, keep the good work going. Very good. Rafa says, I said this on another live stream. You did, sir. Everyone here on chat agrees with me that Britain should learn more with Denmark's politics and have their strong anti-immigration laws. Yes, Denmark's been quite good these days. Well, talking about mass immigration, the news today was that yesterday over 700 people came into the south coast of England on dinghies, over 700, beating the previous record of the 12th of April when 656 came in. And, you know, this article in the Telegraph says it's dated 10th of April, 6 days ago. Only 5 convicted as 6,000 arrive in boats. The record number of 6,642 migrants have reached the UK this year, up from 4,600 at the same point in 2024. Well, this was 6 days ago, and it's saying 6,642. Today, it's 9,000. That's how many have come in the last few days. And you look at the social media, and everybody is rightly outraged about that, and everybody's reporting it. But what nobody's ever doing is saying, okay, well, how do we stop this? And I'm going to tell you how we stop it. It's very, very simple. But before I do that, I just want to point out that the Labour people will say, oh, we have to smash the gangs. But as this points out, only 5 have been convicted of 6,000 people who've arrived. What you need to do is to convict 6,000. That's what you need to do, but I'll get to that in a moment. And the reason the Labour Party can't do anything is because, and I know people don't like to hear this, but these people are, the people who are coming across in the dinghies are exercising their so-called legal right under the UK's membership of the UN Refugee Convention. The UN Refugee Convention was set up in 1951 when the population of the world was 2.5 billion. The population of the world now is well over 8 billion. And the 1951 UN Refugee Convention is completely out of date, but it is one of the core laws that govern the post-war globalist structure. And it's one of these laws that people like Swinney and Sarwar and Starmer and the Tories as well, they've all grown up with and considered just part of the furniture of modern political life. And the idea of changing or suspending or stopping or coming out of those sorts of legal conventions, it doesn't occur to them. And if it occurred to them, they would be aghast at the thought. But that's what needs to be done, because these things are no longer fit for purpose. For example, take the UN Refugee Convention. It has a legal obligation upon every member state, Britain, that effectively entraps that country into a policy which is effectively a form of open borders. It puts a very onerous legal obligation on every member country not to send anybody who claims for asylum back to the country from which they're claiming to be unsafe, not to send them back without having thoroughly investigated their claim and found otherwise. So if somebody rocks up at Dover, we either have to investigate their claim, which is expensive and can take months and years, and we have to find one way or the other, or we can declare their claim inadmissible. But we still can't send them back to that country, as I say, without an investigation which proves that they're not at risk. So what we have to do with the inadmissible claims is find a safe third country to send them to. And That's almost impossible because who's going to take them? So we end up with all of these people claiming asylum, many of whom we investigate, and for those that we say are inadmissible, we still have to keep them hanging about because we can't send them to a safe third country because nobody else wants them. So it is effectively just open borders that we're facing. So what we have to do is we have to leave the UN Refugee Convention so that we are no longer entrapped by those requirements. And then what we can do is we can simply say that anybody who comes across the channel or comes through another means of entry that we do not approve of, such as through the back door from the Republic of Ireland, anybody who does that will not be granted any kind of consideration whatsoever, will not be granted asylum, and will be considered to be breaking our law of entry. And the punishment for that will be prison, unless you self-deport. And if you do not self-deport, you're going to prison. And I ask you, how long would we have to do that before the channel crossings ended? We'd only have to do it for at the most a month, a few hundred people, everybody else would get the message and it would stop. And that's the only way we can get out of this. So if I were Keir Starmer, and look, I know he's not going to do this, but here's what I would do if I was Keir Starmer. And I didn't want to leave the UN Refugee Convention because I was so attached to it in my globalist heart. What I would at least do is pass emergency legislation to suspend our membership, to say to the UN, we're suspending our membership because this is an emergency. It effectively is a national invasion. And what we're going to do is we're going to ensure that it's an illegal form of entry now. It's not legal. We've suspended the UN Refugee Convention. We're going to say it's illegal to come across the channel. It's illegal to come in the back door via the Republic of Ireland. And we're going to tell people either you self-deport or you're going to prison because you've broken our laws. And that's what he needs to do. And then, you know, if he gets it under control, maybe he can think about what next. But the first thing he has to do is suspend our membership of the UN Refugee Convention. And don't bother sending them back to France. I mean, they can fly back to France if they want to do so, but France isn't going to take them directly from us. We need to deport them directly back to whatever country they claim to be unsafe in, because quite frankly, we cannot be allowing them to come here in these numbers. The whole point now has been rendered ridiculous by the sheer level of numbers. So there are ways out of this. It just requires the political will. And people say, well, what if those countries won't take them back? These countries will take them back. There's many carrots and there's many sticks that you can use. Okay, say country X won't take their people back. You say to them, okay, for every member of your country in this country, we're not going to allow them to send any money back to your country, or we're going to tax those remittances very heavily. Or you could say, right, your country's not getting any tourist visas. It's not getting any work visas for Britain. It's certainly not getting any study visas. Or we could say, well, we're no longer sending you foreign aid anymore. Or we could repurpose the foreign aid in a way that helped their country and encouraged them to take these people back. There's all sorts of things we can do, but these countries will take these people back. There's no question that they will if you put the screws on them. So whenever you see people talking about how it's a difficult question, it's not a difficult question at all. It's a very easy question to answer. And if there's parties intending to be elected, then this is what they need to do. these are the things that we're mentioning in our new book, which will be coming out in the summer, volume 2 of A Big Book for the Union. All these policies are going to be properly laid out for you. So if you like the fact that we're doing that, if you like the fact that we're communicating these points, please do help us get that book published, because we do need support. And the best way that you can do that is to become a union supporter, which is to say a monthly donor at our union supporters page. We'll get the link up there. Let's, there we are, a forceforgood.uk/union-supporters. And if you prefer just to give us a one-off, then you can do that at a forceforgood.uk/donate to. But that's what we're going to be doing. And I believe in my heart that what I've said will become the law. We will live to see this become the law. And we will live to see lots of things that right now don't seem as if they could be possible. But it only takes a little change in the way of looking at things and everything becomes possible. That's why the talking heads are so keen for us to always think about these channel crossers as poor, vulnerable, dispossessed, exploited. No, they're not. They're people with agency. They're people with self-determination. They're people who know what they're doing. And we know that they know what they're doing as well. And so when you get rid of that way of thinking of the old vulnerable people, when you realize, no, these people are just trying to come here for the benefits. When you realize that, then you can deal with them appropriately, which is to criminalize their behavior. Immediately when they land, you say, okay, you've got two options. You self-deport to wherever you want. You just can't stay here. Or if you choose to stay here, you go into prison for 5 years until you change your mind. It will eventually change, says Richard, because an awful lot of people are fed up with the current so-called policy. Rafa says that Denmark has tough immigration laws, but Austria and the Netherlands have too. Italy is doing the same. I recommend Singapore and Japan as good examples. Yes, they're trying to corrupt Japan, though. They're trying to, the various powers that be are trying to use whatever they can to get Japan to take in the world's wretched refuse, as it says on the Statue of Liberty. But hopefully the Japanese will see through it. But it's going to have to be Britain that sets the agenda. It was Britain that basically set up this 1951 Refugee Convention. It was one of Winston Churchill's less clever ideas. And him and his mates basically got that going, which was very sad, really, at the end of the day. But so it's us that's going to have to turn it over. It's us that's going to have to stop it. And there are people rising now in the UK who will stop it. And do you know what? I'm going to start shouting this sort of stuff at John Swinney as well on Wednesday. Folks, on Wednesday, the 23rd, here in Glasgow, time and venue to be announced. We are going to be having a presence outside John Swinney's Summit of Stupidity. And we're going to be barracking the Scottish political class, and we're going to be demanding answers from them as to their solutions for the mass immigration invasion that's going on in Scotland at the moment, and of course in the rest of the United Kingdom. But this is a perfect moment to do it, because Swinney is holding this conference because he doesn't like the fact that he's hearing people like me and like A Force for Good and others talking about these things. So he's going to try to nip us in the bud, but we're going to put him on the back foot and demand answers. If you want to join us, make sure to stay in touch with us. Sign up to our email aforceforgood.uk/sign-up, and keep an eye on our Facebook page and or our X page /UK A Force for Good for those, and you will be kept in touch about what we're doing, because we're inviting everybody to join us. Okay. Indeed, most immigrants are economic migrants, but goodness me, number 10 Downing Street has been loving Britain's diverse ethnicities this week. In the Christian calendar, this is Holy Week, with Good Friday 2 days from now, with Holy Saturday and Easter Sunday, of course, this weekend. However, you wouldn't know that if you had been following number 10's Twitter page, because they've found every day under the sun in the last few days that have not related in any way to Christianity. We've got some pics here. Let's stick the first one up. This was, let's get rid of that thing along the bottom, so I can see what dates these were. Yes, this was the 10th of April, and the Prime Minister was wishing Jains, Jains, in the UK and around the world a peaceful and blessed Mahavir Jayanti. Don't ask me what that is, but have a peaceful and blessed one. So that was on the 10th. This one, I think, was maybe the next day. Shang Pishak Samish to Jewish communities here in the UK and around the world celebrating Passover. Okay. Then on the 13th, wishing Sikhs in the UK and around the world peace, happiness, and prosperity. This Vaishakhi. Okay. And I don't even know what this means. Wishing a joyous Tamil and Sinhala New Year to everyone celebrating. That was on the 14th. And then again on the 14th, okay, not enough. He had to have more. It was Happy Bengali New Year to everyone. Okay. So Charlie Downs put this quite well, actually. He is worth following on X. And he said, as we will all say, this is starting to look like parody. It reveals a lot about how our secular liberal state views religion. Not a set of beliefs about the fundamental nature of the universe, but as a series of superficial, quote-unquote, holidays. They sincerely believe that religion is just a costume that one can choose to put on, and they think that because their religion, which is liberalism, views the self as God and faith as a delusion. This is to say nothing of the fact that Christianity, the religion of the indigenous British, has not been acknowledged once, despite this being Holy Week. It would be one thing for Christianity to be presented as, quote, one option among many. Now, this would be insulting enough, given that the Christian faith is the foundation of the West and, moreover, the truth. It is something else to not even dare speak its name. Isn't that so? It is something else to not even dare speak its name. So what's going on there at number 10's social media office? I think it's a classic example of simply when the minorities have become the authorities. The minorities have become the authorities, and the minorities want to use their position of authority in whatever way they can. But you'd have thought there would have been at least one Christian in there. But apparently not. Apparently not. So this is the benighted UK that we're living in at the moment. but at least we can still point these things out. Good stuff. Good stuff. So, let me see what else I wanted to speak about tonight. We've been talking about a lot. We've been talking about a lot. But the big news as far as our activism is concerned is Wednesday, the 23rd. Please do contact us. And if you can't be out with us on the streets, please do consider supporting those of us who will be out on the streets. And one of the ways you can do that is to check out our shop. And at our shop, we've got things like a wee book for the union, only a £5, still the best introduction to British unionism that's out there. You'll find a link to One Big Country there as well, which is volume 1 of a big book for the union. Or you can also, of course, search Amazon. Simply go on to amazon.co.uk and search for One Big Country. And volume 2 is coming out this summer, and it's going to be a cracker. And what we really need to do is to hire a hall and have a launch event for it as well. That would be worth doing. That would be worth doing if we have the money for that. But that would be worth doing. Also, check out our shop for our magazines as well. You can buy our magazines, or you can buy back issues of all the magazines. We have produced 10 issues so far. An 11th issue will be published sometime this year, but we need to get the book out the way first. That's the first requirement. But that's how you can help us. And magazines are free as well for our union supporters. That is our monthly donors. Good. Okay, folks. Well, I do hope everybody has a nice Easter weekend. I wish everybody a peaceful Easter. And remember as well that while things in Britain look broken, there will be coming better days. Political points of view are changing in such a way that we will prevail. Okay, we will stop the John Swinneys of this world from destroying our precious Scotland, and the Keir Starmers of this world from destroying our precious United Kingdom. We will win. Always remember that, even because there are ideas out there, I've explained some tonight, that will set us back on the right track again. And so as long as there's people speaking the truth, there's always hope. Okay, folks, as I say, have a blessed Easter. It just remains for me to say, God bless the United Kingdom and God save the King. See you next time.